Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining me. I'm Clint with the Scottish Clans podcast. And for this little treat for you today, we have just a small chunk of the bigger conversation that I've already posted that I had with Dr. Aonghas MacCoinnich of the University of Glasgow. In this little clip, he's going to share with us some information on the different branches of the Mackenzies. Like other large, powerful clans, they had different branches of them that sometimes developed their own trajectory and their own personality, but that specific history of the branch adds to the larger overall story of the clan. So I think this is really helpful for me understanding the Mackenzies, and we have nobody better to teach us than Dr. MacCoinnich. So I really hope you enjoy this. If you do, please give me a thumbs up on it, subscribe. If you want to contribute to the cause, you can go to scottish-clans.com/team, and I've also included that link below. Without any further ado, here is the conversation, this piece of it with Dr. MacCoinnich.
So the MacLeods, they don't just have Lewis, they have the adjoining mainland areas that touch that body of water. And then that from there we get these different branches of the MacLeods. So now pivoting to the Mackenzies, you mentioned the Mackenzies of Gerlock and the Mackenzies are the Mackenzies of Kintel. I'm just wondering about the major branches of the Mackenzies. You know, we talk about the MacDonalds have all these branches that after the defeat of the Lordship of the Isles, after the crown takes that title, they kind of follow a more independent route. But there are these branches that become clans in their own right. And you mentioned the MacDonalds of Glengarry and the lands they held that ended up being taken by the Mackenzies and some following conflict there. I'm just wondering about these other branches of Mackenzies, Gerlock, Kintail. Are there any other notable branches of the Mackenzies that are on the radar?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, during most of this process, the Mackenzies are one unit, and one of the things about clans is they're expanding dynamic. You know, if they're successful, they're expanding dynamic and they're gobbling up other people's lands.
Right.
So the Campbells, for example, form all these cadet branches, but what they try and do is they keep the main branch, all powerful.
Okay.
And if there's going to be lands given to younger sons, they try and push them out to control more lands.
Yeah.
So if it's a successful clan, they're doing that. Mackenzies, Campbells, the MacDonalds do it early on, and then later on they lose out. So yeah, that's partly the dynamic. Now I mentioned the Mackenzies of Gerlock. So the Mackenzies are pretty united, except with the Mackenzies of Gerlock.
Oh, really?
At least two of the Mackenzies of Gerlock die in mysterious circumstances in the dungeons of Aonghas Castle during the 16th century. The reason for this is the Kintail line had, Aonghas Castle is sought after by a young John of Kintail and his he would call his wicked uncle. That's the first of Gerlock in the early 1500s. John gets crown backing. Gerlock is sort of sullen, sitting in the west, not very happy about it. And the Kintail guys are worried about Gerlock. So I think that's why the two of them get bumped off in the 16th century. And as late as 1630, there's a story saying that Colin Mackenzie, first Lord Kintail and first Earl of Seaforth, has this table, this big fancy wooden table in Brahan Castle, the seat of the Clan Mackenzie, and he says there's a big sword slash. There's a big slash in the table, a sword slash, where the Gerlock chief had tried to kill the earlier chief of Clan Mackenzie, but Colin. The reason we know the story is Colin, being a good Christian type of guy, caused this sort of slash to be cut out, so there'd be no remembrance of the quarrel.
Oh, wow.
In that sort of side deal letter, he says, in a letter to his brother, he says, if there's anything comes up with Gerlock, be very careful. Don't trust him.
Interesting.
We actually have that in black and white. So there are these tensions. But pretty much, though, they seem to be united. But as the 17th century progresses, the branches of Clan Mackenzie, the main branches, grow further apart, and the tendency to to sort of fragment increases as the main Seaforth Kintail line becomes towards the end of the century much less able to protect the clan because they're kind of inept. The Mackenzies rose to power through very competent chiefship, very good leadership. But by the later 1600s, they're making all the wrong choices.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they're going away to France and things. I mean, really, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they back the Jacobite horse.
So, just kind of to come full circle, clear back to your story, your personal origins. I know that in Dr. Cathcart's her kinship and clientage, and she talks about clans as they expand and they acquired these new territories, like you just mentioned. It was really important the degree to which they had a kin base in that new territory made a big difference. And then it could be real kinship or fictive kinship through either bonds of man rent or friendship or different mechanisms that they had at their disposal. When the Mackenzies obtained Lewis, did they begin planting it with Mackenzies? And then my first curiosity is that how your family got to be there, was coming over there, or is it a later group that came over? I don't know. Maybe we can finish with that, like bring it full circle back to your own story.
Well, yeah, if you want. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't know. I think so. But the only people who are well documented are people who've got money, and sadly,
that's not the group you have.
None of that came to me. But I think probably that must have been where my paternal line came from. But yeah, if I go back through my family tree, I've got MacLeods in there too, and all these other branches. But in terms of what the Mackenzies did, one of the things they did was they took over because this is a great movement all through Europe in the 17th century. So where do Scots go? I mean, you've got the Spanish going to the New World. You've got the English 1607 onwards going to the New World too. They're going to Ulster. The Scots are actually piling into Eastern Europe in the late 16th century. Huge communities of Scots. Then Ulster comes on stream. But for the Mackenzies, it's this is an opportunity. So they've got new opportunities to settle the place. So you get Mackenzie tenant farmers coming in to Lewis. So you've got Mackenzies, but also names like Grahams, McKeevers, and other names that you find, Baines, that you find, and Grahams, that you find in Mackenzie lands, and you find them transported into Lewis. So we've got an account from an English observer in 1630, which says that Lewis has been substantially repeopled from the adjacent mainland. So what you have in Lewis then is a sort of dispossessed, or I don't know if you quite call it dispossessed, because some of the native families do retain tenancies. None of the MacLeods do. So some of the Macaulays do in Luke in the west. Some of the MacLeod clan or Breheu clan, in English they're now known as Morrison, they retain tax. None of the MacLeod, well, maybe one of the MacLeods, but an island which had been occupied for MacLeods for centuries, none of the MacLeods have these major farms. They're all minor, either minor farmers, or none of the major farms are owned by MacLeods. One of the other things they do is they make sure that there seems to be a pattern whereby if you hold land in Lewis, you also hold land in the mainland. So at least for the first couple of generations, people have a leg on each side of the Minch. So that's one of the ways in which they sort of interact with the ground of Lewis and the people of Lewis. The other thing they're doing is intermarriage. And after, for the first couple of generations, it might be some awkward conversations. But after a couple of generations, of course, things calm down. They're all the same religion. They all speak Gaelic, which helps. It's you know, I mean, just because they speak Gaelic, people can cut throats with just as great facility
Sure.
as not speaking Gaelic, and it doesn't really matter to an extent if it's a Scots-speaking Fifer or a Gaelic-speaking Eastern Rossman that's taking your land. If they're taking your land, they're taking your land. So,
Yeah.
but all in all, you know, you've got things like fosterage, you've got things like marriage, and um, gradually, yes, the Mackenzies do take a firm grip of Lewis.
Well, that's a wonderful narrative. It's a wonderful explanation of so many points. I think there's some things that you mentioned, and they're not just we were talking specifically about MacLeods and Mackenzies, but I think there's some concepts when we're talking about the Scottish clans that think we can learn. Oh, this is clanship generally had these things going on. And so I think this is so much value that you just shared with us. I am so grateful for you coming on. I could I could just if we were just hanging out and we were just on a walk, we just go for hours and hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, by all means, yeah.
If I make it over I am trying so hard to get over to Scotland for a visit, and if I manage to, maybe I'll wave at you.
Oh yeah, we must do. You must come and say hello if you come over. Yeah,
that'd be wonderful.
And if you decide you've got other things you want to talk about, or this hasn't, you know, when you're pulling this together, you'd be editing it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, if you edit it and you think there's some holes in it, and you know there's some questions you want to ask, get in touch and we can do it again.
Oh, I'd
Fill in
love
any
that.
gaps.
I would love a part 2 to this, and I think so will my audience.
Yeah.
So thank you
by
so
all
much.
means.
Go ahead.
You're very welcome, Clinton. Really nice talking to you.
Well,
It's so good to speak
likewise.
to someone who's interested in Scottish history and Gaelic and things like that. Because that's what I do.
It is, and it's nice to have somebody who that's your thing. You get to research this and write about it and teach people. And so, thank you for teaching us today. I sure appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Clint.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that was as good for you as it was for me. If there's anything that I forgot to ask, please include it in the comments below. I do still have communication with these people that I've had on to interview. So if I can't answer it, then we definitely have reach back capability. So please let me know what you liked, what surprised you, what was interesting to you, and go over and check out the podcast. There's a lot of content over there that I don't have yet on the podcast or on the YouTube channel yet. So thanks for joining me, Marcin Levin Dorasta.